Let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're going on an incredible journey that is going to completely reshape how you think about your own biology. We're starting with something we've all felt, that immediate, heart-pounding sensation of stress. But then we're going to zoom all the way down into the mind-bending quantum mechanics that actually make that feeling possible. We're going to see how your body's stress response isn't just basic biology, it's a profoundly complex quantum event.
So, to start our macro to micro zoom, we really have to ask a highly relatable question about our immediate physical reaction to a threat. What actually happens when you panic? Think about the last time you were startled, or maybe had to speak in public. Your palms sweat, your heart races, your breathing gets incredibly shallow. Why does your body undergo such an instantaneous, radical transformation?
Well, that brings us directly to the sympathetic nervous system. Classically, you know this as the body's emergency override. Whether you're preparing to fight, flee, or even just freeze like a mouse caught by a cat, this system rapidly redirects your cellular resources. It literally shuts down non-essential functions because, frankly, your body decides that digesting your lunch simply isn't a priority if you might become lunch yourself. Instead, it gears absolutely everything else up to keep you alive.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the psychology of the stress response, trace the anatomy of sympathetic nerves, and look at metabolism and body homeostasis. Then, we are jumping into the quantum biology revolution, exploring quantum tunneling and synapses, and wrapping up with consciousness and orchestrated reduction.
Okay, part 1, psychology of the stress response, looking through the macro lens.
When you face a stressor, or honestly, even just anticipate one, central networks in your brain instantly fire up. Think of the amygdala as your brain's highly sensitive alarm system. The second it detects a psychological threat, it mediates that sudden wash of panic and instantly alerts the HPA axis, which acts kind of like an emergency dispatcher. This dispatcher then triggers your adrenal glands to flood your body with epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's an immediate psychophysical response that alters numerous body functions in seconds. This actually shifts you into a heightened state called allostasis. Unlike standard homeostasis, where your body just tries to stay at a resting baseline, allostasis is your body preemptively changing its baseline to meet an upcoming challenge.
Moving on to part 2, let's map out the anatomy of these sympathetic nerves and see how the body is wired. The structural contrast between our nervous system divisions is pretty fascinating. The sympathetic preganglionic neurons originate strictly in what's called the thoracolumbar outflow. In simple terms, this means these crucial signals launch specifically from the middle of your spine, spanning right from your chest down to your lower back. This targeted central area is essentially the foundational anatomical hardware of your fight or flight response.
And those preganglionic neurons don't just travel in a simple straight line. Instead, they branch out into these paired, almost pearl-like structures running down both sides of your spine, known as paravertebral ganglia. This branching architecture is absolutely vital. From these ganglia, postganglionic neurons can rapidly hijack everything at exactly the same time. It allows the system to simultaneously crank up your heart rate while completely inhibiting your digestive tract. It's a highly synchronized, full-body takeover.
Section 3 brings us to metabolism and body homeostasis, looking at the systemic impact.
Here's where we have to weigh the acute benefits of this system against the chronic risks. Short-term sympathetic activation is fantastic. It rapidly mobilizes energy and oxygen to your muscles and brain to help you survive immediate danger. But what happens when you face chronic stress and this survival switch is left on for too long? Well, that leads to devastating metabolic consequences. Chronic sympathetic overactivity is heavily linked to visceral obesity, systemic inflammation, and the overactivation of ROS. ROS is essentially a complex hormone system designed to regulate your blood pressure. But when it's stuck on overdrive by chronic stress, it severely damages blood vessels and leads to chronic hypertension. This right here is the dark side of our built-in survival mechanism.
It's wild how closely the brain and metabolism are linked. Normal brain insulin signaling actually acts as a critical brake on sympathetic outflow to your fat tissue. It keeps everything in check and suppresses excess glucose production in the liver. But if you lose that signal, say the brain becomes insulin resistant, it unleashes absolute metabolic chaos. The brakes come entirely off. You get unrestrained lipolysis, which is the rapid, uncontrolled breakdown of fats into your bloodstream, right alongside a chronically high sympathetic tone. This drives a vicious cycle where stress causes metabolic dysfunction, and that metabolic dysfunction causes even more physical stress. But are you ready for the twist? We've covered the psychology, the nerves, and the metabolism. But how do these signals travel through your biology so impossibly fast?
That brings us to section 4,
the quantum biology revolution. Let's zoom way into the micro level. Standard neuroscience models actually struggle to fully explain the sheer speed and efficiency of human brain activity. For decades, the standard scientific consensus was that our brains and bodies were just too warm and noisy for delicate quantum mechanics to survive. The prevailing belief was that fragile quantum effects only happened in freezing, isolated physics labs. But recent observations have completely shattered that argument. Quantum coherence isn't just for supercomputers anymore. It's happening inside your cells, in a warm, messy, biological environment right now.
Which leads us to Section 5, Quantum Tunneling in Synapses, the Ultimate Fast Lane.
Classical physics literally says what happens in your nerve membranes shouldn't be possible. In the tiny ion channels of those membranes, which are scaled down to the angstrom, meaning they're just 1/10,000,000th of a meter wide, ions move impossibly fast while maintaining strict selectivity. Classical models consistently underestimate how this is physically happening. The answer? The ions are literally bypassing classical energy barriers using quantum tunneling. To put it simply, instead of a particle trying to climb over a tall physical wall, it acts as a wave and just phases right through the solid barrier. It's much like a ghost walking through a wall.
Breaking down this synaptic communication step by step is absolutely fascinating. An action potential arrives and calcium ions enter the nerve terminal. But the actual release of the neurotransmitter into the synapse, a process called exocytosis, is triggered by something incredible. Researchers propose that it relies on Davidoff solitones. These are essentially robust packets of quantum energy that travel along your proteins without losing their shape. These quantum energy packets twist the protein helices and trigger the chemical release through quantum tunneling in the snare protein complex. This means that the awe-inspiring split-second feeling of a racing heart during a fight-or-flight response relies directly on quantum wave-particle duality functioning flawlessly inside your cells.
Finally, Section 6, Consciousness and Orchestrated Reduction, our grand finale.
Let's unpack this, because it gets incredibly dense but profoundly beautiful. This brings us to the orchestrated objective reduction, or ORC-OR theory, pioneered by mathematical physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. They posit that the structural components of your neurons, tiny tubes called microtubules that act as the cell's scaffolding, actually function as biological quantum computers. Inside these microtubules, quantum states evolve in superposition, meaning they exist in multiple possible states or realities simultaneously. According to this theory, consciousness itself isn't just a computational output of the brain, it's the orchestrated moment when these multiple quantum possibilities collapse into a single reality. And astonishingly, this collapse is proposed to be influenced by the fundamental fabric of gravity at the Planck scale, literally the absolute smallest measurable scale in the universe.
So, what should we take away from this entire macro to micro journey? Well, I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time your heart races in panic and your sympathetic nervous system kicks into high gear, ask yourself, are you merely feeling a biological reflex dictated by anatomy and metabolism? Or are you experiencing a profound quantum event, a coherent symphony orchestrated within the very architecture of the universe itself? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely stay curious.